Just me, man. Yeah, 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 yeah. So there was this academic freedom panel featuring Lindsay Shepherd. And I have video of just the Q&A. And there were some interesting things that were happening at this Q&A. Actually, pardon my French, it was a total shit show. I don't know who the moderator was, but he wasn't moderating nothing.
Is there anything that I said that was incorrect?
Again, I think that...
No, just name one thing that I said that was incorrect.
I think that the view that you hold is a result of...
Bullshit!
And I don't know if he was a centrist or not. He was like that bag kind of centrist that everybody bags on, both left and right. Because of his phallocentrism with a F-A-L-L-W, not a P-H-A-L-L-O. See, I do use homonyms, but I'm not homophobic. They just kind of slip out, and then I need to specify. So nothing against homonyms. I just want to make sure that when I say phallocentrism, you know the word that I'm playing with is a different word while I'm still playing with the other. So here is a question that is asked by a dude to this panel on free speech in academia. Here we go.
You have anything to add? No? Yes, please.
Okay. My name is Ifo. I am Isoko. Some people from Europe thought that it was rational to invade, kidnap, enslave, and bring people to this land. Then they thought that it was rational to commit genocide on indigenous peoples. Then they thought that it was rational to set up residential schools. And right now we have more native kids in care in this country than they did in the height of residential school. So if this is the example of a bastion of rational, I want irrational.
Okay, first note. I like this group in the first row. They're like smiling at each other and like clapping vigorously like they won. But to go to the question, he asked, so Western people thought it was rational to enslave and to colonize and to set up residential schools. And if that's rational, he wants us to see what irrational is. Now, I don't even know what he's mean by rationality, because we can rationalize things, right? But rationality is like a certain way of thinking that is attempting to get to a logically sound understanding or articulation, at least, of any given topic. In a sense, rationality did allow the European powers to become the European powers because they had a rational mindset toward the material world. They developed certain ways of viewing the material world that gave them an advantage. Now, how they used what they gained from rationality is something different than rationality, right? So you create a knife through rationality, right? You study the earth, you figure out what metal is, you study like that stuff that's hot, and then you figure out how to manipulate that stuff that's hot, and then you rub it against the metal, and then you rub the metal against the hot stuff, and then you have a knife, right? Now, rationality got you to the knife, right? Rationality didn't necessarily say, I want a knife. Rationality just allowed you to mobilize that desire for something and then implement that desire for something into the material world. Now, when you have the knife, you're like, wow, I have this knife. What does rationality tell me about this knife? Well, it's sharp and it's hard, and therefore it can cut through anything that is softer than it. That's basically what rationality will say. And you can correct me if I'm being irrational here. But that knife is now a potential to be used whether rationally or irrationally. You can use that knife to, stab a trunk of a tree. That's not necessarily rational unless you're trying to climb the tree, right? So what is the motivation or the use or the purpose of a series of acts can be informed by rationality, but doesn't necessarily have to be informed by rationality. But let's let him continue because he starts ramping things up now.
Now, tied into that idea of Western nationality is the idea of Nazi ideology.
Western rationality, Nazi ideology.
The idea that there is one way that is supreme, which is usually the white way. And then whatever it is that people say that are from different cultural backgrounds or understanding are now considered irrational or infantile. Like when our ancestors talked about the need to respect the earth and to love each other, and that we are all brothers and sisters and that we're all family. White people, still today, consider that irrational and childish, which is why there's so much money in the Western world spent on weapons of mass destruction. Like Halifax is manufacturing weapons to kill people. So I don't want you guys to talk about rational until the West becomes rational.
White people have done historical wrongs, right? And white people invented Nazism. And white people think that loving the earth and loving people is childish and infantile. Yes, in a way, love is infantile because it leads to infants. Or maybe, let's be a little bit more generous and say that he's saying that there's this ancestral tradition of loving the earth and loving one another, and that is what white people find to be infantile, these ancient ways of viewing the world. And I want to know if he's not whitewashing certain sorts of perceptions of the past to say that, you know, like there was this blessed time where there was all these native people who were just loving each other and loving the earth, and there was no money, time, or resources spent on warfare, which I don't think was ever the case.
Well, okay,
So I just have to respond to that because that was fundamental white supremacy. So now,
And that is fundamental to white supremacy, that there is Western rationality, Nazi ideology, one way, which is the white way, which is to see love and respect for the earth as infantile or some sort of lower mode of being and engaging with the earth. Now, I think white people had this whole like love each other movement that I think they adopted from Semitic cultures. That might be a white idea or an idea that whites kind of like banded around, but I don't know. Who knows if Christianity counts for anything in his perception, which Nazis actually were against Christianity. So it's fair enough. White people are conflicted. It's a crazy story, isn't it? Like white people are like making all these textbooks and they're making all this math and they're making all this war and they're making all this religion and music and art and bombs, and you're like, what the fuck, white people? What is your problem? Choose one thing. Either be completely evil so we can like defeat you, or, you know, give us all the love back, I guess. I don't know. I can see how it's confusing though.
you can discuss issues of rape without actually, or sexual assault mentioning the word rape. So that is actually logically incorrect. Now, my question is this. You talk about freedom. People that enslave people like me are talking about freedom.
People who enslaved people like you, and he's associating the people on the panel, Lindsay Shepherd's one of them, have actually enslaved people, or people like her have enslaved people. And okay, that's his opening salvo. You talk about freedom while you're a slave owner.
You haven't paid reparations yet. You haven't returned the lands that you're stolen. How can you talk about freedom? Well, let's get more precise. Freedom for white people would mean that Nazis can freely organize in St. Mary's and put up posters so they can continue to hunt people that look like me. That's not freedom. They say with freedom comes responsibility. What the white, alt-right wants is freedom without responsibility. You're not responsible for the shit that you say. And when we come to actually have logical questions for you about the implications of what you're saying, or the fact that the alt-right and all these Nazi groups are following you in masses, you're like, hey, we have nothing to do with it. So you need to check yourself before you wreck yourself. So my question is, what is your response to the fact that the stuff that you're saying that you think is rational and good for the betterment of society is leading to people like me being under increasing attack from the alt-right, from the Proud Boys, from the people who did shit in the States, from all this nonsense. I have to ask you, where's your responsibility for the stuff that you're putting out and what it's doing to this society that you claim to be free? And I want to hear
One thing that pops up over and again when people criticize Lindsay Shepherd is that they criticize that she has so many followers. This comes up time and again. You have so many followers, and those followers are Nazis, aren't they? Some of your followers are. You can't deny it. You don't ever talk about them. You never talk about them, all your followers. So therefore you're a Nazi. This whole follower thing is really interesting, that is somehow a valid argument to this group. And I wonder what is the emotional content of that, because, I mean, who knows what the rational content is. They're just saying that it's guilt by association, right? That she has to take responsibility for the things that she produces being misused by other people. Now, the thing is that freedom would dictate that you aren't responsible for what other people do with your words, right? You do, I mean, personally, I do feel a little bit of a responsibility to provide a mode of speaking that gains people the ability to communicate to each other without resorting to violence. Like, I want to frame or to provide a framework of discussion where we can hash through uncomfortable conversations. But if any given sentence of mine can be used to, destroy the world or to go around hunting people, how much responsibility do I have for that? I can say here and explicitly, don't use any of my videos for the purposes of inculcating people into abhorrent ways of believing that you are a superior race or an inferior race. That is not the purpose of my videos. But beyond that fallacy of guilt by association, there's this emotional content to, attacking Jordan Peterson for all his followers, right? And attacking Lindsay Shepherd for all her followers. And what is the moral content of that? One is that there's that envy. It's like, well, I want all those followers. Why has she got all those followers? Why does Jordan have all those followers? I want all those followers, right? There's that envy thing. But I think there's something even a little bit deeper, even a little bit more insidious going on. It's because there's this group mentality. There's this fundamental desire to reduce people into groups. So what they do is to attack people based on their group. And then if you are part of a big group, then they squint at that big group and say, well, look, she argues against my position, and so do these other people. So therefore, they're all in this one mass. They're all that one group. And they talk about freedom, but where's their responsibility for one another? Where's their responsibility from stopping people chasing me down the street? And the thing is that, yeah, this is a free society, and that free society isn't complete freedom to go around chasing people down. In Canada and the United States, you are not allowed to go around chasing people down. You will be stopped. We will expend a lot of resources trying to stop you. I mean, we won't make bombs to stop you, but we'll make bombs to, I don't know, let's not enter the whole bomb debate. But anyways, it's disingenuous for him to say, to make this argument like, you're talking about freedom, and what about responsibility, and what about the things you say are giving rise to more hatred? And that is a valid concern. I really do think that it's a valid concern to ask, what do we do with the anger and hatred that people have towards other people? What do we do with the dehumanization that occurs between one group and another group? I would say rational, reasoned debate would open pathways for people to relax enough to enter into discourse with one another and then eventually to see each other as human beings. Whether or not they agree with each other, they will eventually come to an understanding of each other as human beings if we are given the right context to do that. And one of the ways of doing that is talking, and one of the ways of doing that is learning how to be rational. Another way of doing that is food. Another way of doing that is music. Another way of doing that is building something together instead of, I guess one way of doing that is going out and making a big change in the world. And maybe that change in the world does have some sort of activism component in it, but that shouldn't be the central thing, because an activist needs to be against something, and usually against a group. And then that againstness forms their own group. And I've said that plenty of times before. But let's see what this panel has to say to this man's kind of question.
To be honest, I think your view is precisely the result of an absence of rationality in our education system.
Okay, I have to say that was a misstep. I don't know who was on the panel that said that, who said that I think that your view is the result of a lack of rationality in our education system. And now that makes it a personal insult to him and saying that he's being irrational. Now he has to hit back, right? So the rationality quotient of the conversation has been diminished by that. I think the one way that you could have twisted that response just a tiny bit is to say, you know what, I think all of this hatred, all this anger, all this rage has to do with the decline of rationality in our education system across the board. People are being irrational across the board. And so I think that we need to go back to rationality. But the speaker, for whatever reason, he made it a personal assault, and here we go.
Is there one thing that I said that was incorrect?
Collective guilt is unjustifiable. That's the thing.
I'll go with
No one has
rational
to feel
people
guilty
that stop slavery.
Just asking you to recognize your fucking privilege. Recognize your white supremacy. That's what you want to see my ID?
Okay, this is why I called it a shit show. I'm sorry for using that word. I mean, I'm dropping F-bombs too. I don't know why. I only apologize sometimes for cussing. I should try not to cuss. That's a side note. Anyways, this is why this is a shit show. There's just people like yelling back and forth, and the whole room is frothing with anxiety and anger. And I don't know where exactly that anxiety and anger is coming from. That is the question. Where is all the anxiety come from? A lot of what's going on right now, it's masquerading itself as reasonable or as righteous or as, trying to right things, or as reactionary, or as, reactionary in both ways. Like, I'm going to react to Trump, or we're going to react to PC culture, we're going to react to SJWs, we're going to react. And why are we so upset? Why are we so on edge? I mean, that's the question. And if we can start to get to an understanding of that, before we can even start to ask that question, we need to relax, right? Maybe we need to get the flu and get taken out for a week or so, and then have all of our strength completely drained from us, realize the fact that we're kind of just drifting along atop all these biological processes that we really can't control. We can just try to rationally manage, and then we can get back up and come together and have a longer discussion. But the discussion is not going to move forward when we're all yelling at each other. That's not what's going to help us out. But I'll let the guy make his response.
So I'm going to ask you to answer logically. Let's even use Western European logic, which is Bible. Hold on, I was going to have a want to. You say freedom. You're getting triggered. Chill out. So can you answer the question logically? Is there anything that I said that was incorrect?
Again, I think that...
No, just name one thing that I said that was incorrect.
I think that the view that you hold is a result of...
Bullshit.
...in the education system.
Okay, so obviously you can't answer it because and you, what's your response?
Yeah, I mean, things you say, I completely agree that they're horrendous. Who doesn't? And, Proud Boys, alt-right.
Yeah.
I disavow what they do. And so when you say that what I...
She just said she did. Why don't you let her talk?
Ever in a public setting besides this name.
Yeah, someone Facebook and live say you can have Mike Sonovich and Proud Boys.
They're trying to compel her to speak. Just a little note of irony in there.
Say you can have them right now. Say it.
She just did.
So, just going back to what you were saying earlier, so in the 8 minutes of what I said, what did you find about it that appeals to the alt-right, that would appeal to those groups and incite violence?
You're seriously asking that question after the number of followers that you have?
No, what I just said now. Weren't we talking about what?
She's like, what did I say that appeals or incites violence from the alt-right? And he brings up that follower thing right away. It's like, you're asking me after having like 2,000 Twitter followers? Like, how does that give her, in their mind, if you are followed, that is what gives you authority. That is what gives you power, that you're followed. which speaks to me that they are followers, like, and not any given individual of that, but like the ideology that's bubbling up is this follower ideology, that you follow an idea, you follow a leader. And what is the trajectory of a follower? And how would the trajectory of a follower, or the mindset of a follower, be upset about the idea of freedom? Right? So the follower has a particular trajectory, and they know where they're going, or else they know the person that knows where they're going. And so they are assuming that Lindsay knows where she's going, and she's going where all of her followers are going, which is this alt-right dystopia, right? Maybe that's what it is. Maybe they don't understand how to comprehend that Lindsay is a free agent, and she's espousing the ability to be a free agent. And that doesn't mesh fundamentally with their ideology, which is that we all agree, we're all in the same bucket, we're all in the same pathway, we're all going the same way, we all love each other, right? We all love the earth, and that is what we do. And we all follow that love wherever it takes us. Which isn't bad. That sounds good. Love, justice, peace, equality, sunshine, lovey-doveyness. That's great. That sounds great. That appeals to a very fundamental infantile instinct that we all have. And infantile in the best way. Because I'm a mammal. I need a boob, and I need food, and I need warmth. And that's why I'm wearing this scarf that somebody's inevitably going to comment on, And that infantile, like that infantile and the like foundational principle of being a mammal, of being an entity that is composed such as we are, that will attach itself or be attracted to that which is promising love and comfort. And what doesn't promise love and comfort? Freedom doesn't promise love and comfort. Freedom promises actually the necessity to order chaos, right? To have chaos, to meet chaos head on, to not have an apparatus that solves the problem of chaos for you, but that you have to be in control of, and you have to meet head on.
But I just said now. Weren't we talking about what I just said?
You responded to Osama when he talked about the need to have respectful freedom, which means love, right? So if you know something is fundamentally hurtful to somebody else, the loving response, if you're a decent human being, that your parents taught you how to respect other people, is not to willingly do stuff that will incite hatred or will lead to the death of people like me. That's if you're a decent human being. Now, if you want to argue that rationality is Nazi ideology, you should just kill people if you feel like other people, that's a different conversation. And if that is your stance and you stand with the Nazis, that's okay, at least be honest. But don't be disingenuous and say this stuff, because you're not a 2-year-old. You know what you're saying. If you claim that you're rational.
Next question.
Apparently I'm not.
There is absolutely a structure that he's operating under where all that stuff makes sense. And we could tease that out. But that way of thinking, of jumping around associatively with all these concepts and like jumbling all those concepts, that can be beautiful. Like, you can make great poem where you're associating things, or you can be really funny while you're associating things like that. But once you start getting angry, and once you start mobilizing people to do things, like that becomes very unwieldy when you pour a bunch of anxiety into that jumbling of, concepts. Whereas rationality would presuppose that you set the emotions aside and you build something that shows you exactly how love connects to freedom and where the balance is in that. In personal freedom, the freedom to speak things, the freedom to espouse certain abhorrent ideas or certain other ideas that other people disagree with, and he lumps everything together into this big bag of hurt. And it seems like he has a problem with freedom because he conceives of freedom as irresponsibility, as utter irresponsibility. And I think ultimately that freedom is the ability to choose what you are enslaved to. We're always going to be serving something. That means we're always going to be heading in a certain direction. We're always going to be giving up certain things in order to gain another thing, right? But freedom is the ability to select your outcome, to aim toward a certain outcome. That is where freedom is. But I don't know how that works into his argument or not. But there seems to be an inability for people to, there seems to be a hypersensitivity. There seems to be a maladjustedness in a certain contingent of the youth right now, that they are so upset and on fire. And the reasons for that are going to be multiple and multi-fid. People are unprepared for confronting life. Maybe that's what it is. That the young people are unprepared to confront uncertainty, to confront the ultimate uncertainty, which is what do they do with themselves? And maybe there's even stuff going on in the background where people are starting to sense that our world is in trouble, right? That we're in trouble in a lot of ways. But at the same time, we have never lived in a more peaceful time in history. We haven't. Net crime is down right now, but murders are getting higher, mostly because of Chicago for whatever reason. But we generally are living in a very safe environment, probably too safe, so that we have all this pent-up anxiety that is disproportionate to the level of harm that we experience because, we're no longer interacting with a very difficult life. Life is getting easier and easier and easier, but we are programmed for a harder life than that which has been provided us. And because the difficulty of life that we can sink our minds and our hearts and our energies into is so freaking complex right now that it might be the case that people don't know where to put their energies yet. And that would have to do with education, not preparing them with the complexity of the world. But that is a long enough episode for you all. I want to leave you with this beautiful little nightcap.
Do you have any friends or acquaintances who are Nazis?
Oh my God.
To the next question. We know the answer.
We don't know the answer. The topic is freedom of expression in academia, right?
Yeah. No, well, it's academic freedom, yes.
Academic freedom.
Yes.
Find out the freedom of speech principle.
You know that the Nazis weren't in favor of academic freedom, right? Do you know who the Nazis were?